On the night of August 2nd, 1989, the town of Prince George would change forever. As darkness fell and the town drifted into sleep, the Jack family stepped out of their home in the late hours and into the unknown. By morning, they were gone, never to be seen again. What happened that night would leave a dark cloud over this quiet town, a mystery so chilling that it would haunt Prince George for decades to come. What could have caused an entire family to vanish without a trace? In the heart of British Columbia, nestled among vast stretches of wilderness, lies the town of Prince George. This town, while modest in size, was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, trusting in the safety and security of their surroundings. In 1989, Prince George was a place where life moved at a steady, predictable pace, until one summer night when the Jack family disappeared, shattering the town's sense of peace and security forever. The Jack family was like many others in Prince George. Ronald Jack, just 26 years old, was the father of the family. He was known as a hard-working man who would take on any job to provide for his wife and 2 sons. He had a quiet demeanor, the kind of man who spoke when necessary and kept his thoughts to himself. His wife, Doreen, also 26, was a devoted mother who spent her days caring for their children, 9-year-old Russell and 4-year-old Ryan. The boys were typical children, full of energy and curiosity, always looking for the next adventure. They lived a modest life, marked by the struggles that come with raising a young family on a limited income. Yet, despite the hardships, the Jacks were close-knit, bound together by love and the determination to create a better life. Like many Indigenous families in Canada, they faced challenges that others might not understand, but they carried on, driven by the hope that better days were ahead. In their small home, the Jacks found comfort in each other, sharing meals, stories, and dreams for the future. They were not wealthy, nor were they influential, but they were known by their neighbors as kind, decent people who did their best to get by. To those who knew them, they were just an ordinary family, trying to make a life for themselves in a world that often seemed indifferent to their struggles. But the Jack family's story would take a dark turn on a warm night in August 1989. That night, they would step out of their home and into the unknown, leaving behind a mystery that has haunted Prince George and Canada ever since. The events of August 2nd, 1989 began like any other day for the Jack family. Ronald spent part of the day in town, visiting local establishments in search of work. Times were tough, and finding steady employment was a constant challenge. When Ronald met a man at one of the local bars that day, it likely seemed like a stroke of luck. The man, who introduced himself as someone with connections to a logging camp, offered Ronald a job. It wasn't just a job for Ronald, there would be work for Doreen as well, with accommodations for their children. The man mentioned a logging camp, a place up north where the pay was good and where the family could stay together. The details of the offer were enticing. For a family struggling to make ends meet, this could have been the break they needed. But there was something about the offer that, looking back, seems almost too convenient, too perfect. Since the Jacks did not own a car, the man offered to pick up the family that very night and drive them to the camp, where they could begin working immediately. Ronald didn't hesitate. He went home, told Doreen about the opportunity, and the decision was made. As night fell, the Jack family packed a few essentials. It was a warm summer evening, the kind where the air is thick with the scent of pine and the hum of cicadas. The streets of Prince George were quiet, the town settling in for another peaceful night. At around 1:30 a.m., a vehicle pulled up outside the Jack family's home. A man, presumably the same man who had spoken to Ronald earlier, was behind the wheel. Ronald, Doreen, and their 2 young sons climbed into the vehicle, and they drove off into the night. It was the last time anyone saw the Jack family. As the truck disappeared into the darkness, it carried with it 4 lives, and the beginning of one of Canada's biggest mysteries. In the days following their departure, no one thought much about the Jack family's absence. They had mentioned the new job to a few people, so it wasn't surprising that they hadn't been seen around town. But as days turned into a week, those who knew the family began to grow concerned. Ronald's mother, in particular, became increasingly worried when she hadn't heard from them. Ronald was known to keep in touch, especially with his mother, so the silence was troubling. Ronald's mother, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, reported her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren missing. The police in Prince George were immediately involved, but at first there was little to go on. The family had left voluntarily, after all, and there was no immediate reason to suspect foul play. But as the days dragged on, the lack of communication became more alarming. The police began a formal investigation, and the quiet town of Prince George became the center of a growing mystery. The police began their investigation by trying to piece together the events of that fateful night. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have had contact with the Jacks in the days leading up to their disappearance. The man who had offered Ronald the job was a key figure in the investigation, but he remained elusive. Witnesses at the bar described him in vague terms: a Caucasian male, perhaps in his mid-30s, with a medium build. But beyond this, there was little information to go on. One of the first challenges the police faced was the vastness of the area where the family might have gone. British Columbia is known for its rugged wilderness, and the dense forests and remote logging camps made the search incredibly difficult. The police scoured the area for any sign of the family or their vehicle, but the search yielded no results. The logging camp mentioned by the mysterious man could not be located, and it became increasingly likely that the camp didn't exist at all. As the investigation continued, the police explored every possible lead. They interviewed other workers from the logging industry, hoping to find someone who might have known about the job offer or the man who had made it, but no one could provide any useful information. The police also looked into the possibility that the family had met with foul play. Could they have been lured into a trap? Was the job offer a ruse to get them into a remote area where they could be easily overpowered? Despite these theories, the investigation stalled. Without concrete evidence or a clear direction to follow, the police were left with little more than speculation. The investigation also faced challenges due to the time that had passed before the family was reported missing. Valuable time had been lost, and any potential evidence at the scene was likely long gone. As weeks turned into months, the case grew colder, and the sense of urgency began to wane. The disappearance of the Jack family cast a dark shadow over Prince George. What had once been a peaceful town was now gripped by fear and uncertainty. The idea that an entire family could vanish without a trace was unfathomable, and the lack of answers only deepened the sense of unease. In the absence of concrete information, rumors began to circulate. Some people believed that the family had been taken by force, perhaps by someone with a grudge or a dark motive. Others speculated that they had been involved in something illegal, and their disappearance was a consequence of that involvement. But those who knew the Jacks dismissed these ideas. Ronald and Doreen were good people, devoted to their children and to each other. The idea that they would be involved in anything illicit was unthinkable. As the investigation dragged on with no new developments, some began to lose hope that the family would ever be found. The search had turned up nothing, and the police seemed to be at a loss for where to look next. But the mystery of the Jack family's disappearance continued to haunt the town. Parents kept a closer watch on their children, and the woods that once seemed so inviting now held a sense of danger. Even those who had never met the Jacks were affected by their story, a reminder of how fragile life could be. Among the indigenous community in Prince George, the case struck a particularly deep chord. The Jacks were part of this community, and their disappearance was a stark reminder of the dangers that indigenous people often face. There was a growing sense that the case was not receiving the attention it deserved, a feeling that was unfortunately all too common in cases involving missing indigenous people. The Jack family's case is a part of this larger narrative, a reminder of the many lives lost and the many questions that remain unanswered. For the indigenous community in Prince George, the disappearance of the Jacks was a deeply personal tragedy, one that echoed the experiences of too many other families across the country. As the investigation continued to stall, there was growing frustration within the community. The feeling that the case was not being taken seriously enough began to fester, leading to a deep sense of injustice. The Jacks deserved better. Ronald and Doreen deserved to be found, and Russell and Ryan deserved a chance to grow up. But as the months passed, it became clear that those hopes were fading. As the years passed, the case of the Jack family's disappearance faded from the headlines, but it never left the minds of those who knew them or those who were haunted by the unresolved nature of their story. Over time, several theories have emerged, each offering a different explanation for what might have happened to the family. One theory suggests that the family was the victim of a targeted attack, possibly due to Ronald's indigenous heritage or for some unknown reason related to his past. This theory asserts that the job offer was a ruse, designed to lure the family into a remote area where they could be easily abducted or worse. But this theory, like all the others, is based on speculation rather than evidence. Another theory is that the family met with a tragic accident in the wilderness. British Columbia's vast forests are known for their rugged terrain, and it's possible that the vehicle the family was traveling in went off the road and into an area so remote that it was never found. This theory is plausible, given the challenges of searching such a vast and dense area, but it does little to explain the mysterious man who offered Ronald the job. Some have even speculated that the family's disappearance could be linked to something more sinister, being taken by people who had horrifying plans for the family. This theory is particularly chilling, suggesting that the family was taken by individuals with the means and motive to make them disappear without a trace. But again, there is no concrete evidence to support this idea. Then, there is the theory that the family was the victim of a random act of violence. Perhaps they encountered someone with ill intentions on the road to the supposed logging camp, someone who saw an opportunity to do something horrible and took it. But this theory, like the others, remains unproven. The mystery of the Jack family's disappearance continues to captivate and terrify those who hear it. The lack of answers only deepens the sense of unease, leaving those who remember the case to wonder what really happened that night. The truth, it seems, may never be known. Even after all these years, the disappearance of the Jack family raises more questions than it answers. What happened to Ronald, Doreen, Russell, and Ryan? Who was the man who offered them the job, and what were his true intentions? Did the family ever reach the supposed logging camp, or did something terrible happen to them on the way? In the years since the Jack family vanished, Canada has taken steps to address the crisis of missing and perished Indigenous people. Inquiries have been launched, reports have been written, and recommendations have been made. But for the families of those who are still missing, including the Jacks, these efforts often feel too little, too late. The disappearance of the Jack family is a mystery that has endured for more than 3 decades. It is a story that has captivated and terrified those who hear it, a story that serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can exist in even the most ordinary of places. The Jack family, Ronald, Doreen, Russell, and Ryan, vanished on that fateful night in August 1989, leaving behind a void that can never be filled. The investigation into the family's disappearance officially remains open, but without new leads or evidence, it has become a cold case. Over the years, there have been occasional efforts to reignite interest in the case, to bring fresh eyes to the investigation in the hopes of uncovering something that might have been missed. But each time, the efforts have come up short, leaving the fate of the Jack family a mystery. And so, the Jack family story remains a real-life horror story, a mystery that lingers in the shadows, waiting for the day when the truth might finally come to light. Until then, their disappearance will continue to be one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries in Canadian history, a story that will never truly be forgotten.